Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. We have Jennifer and Michael co-hosting today, Madeline in the chat. So we're going to start off with some Spaces news as ever. We are right here on Twitter Spaces, so we make no bones about the fact that our social audio news usually kicks off with news on Twitter Spaces. We like to look at the latest features, the latest ways that people are using social audio here on Spaces. This is a tweet from Hosteline, you'll see it up there in the nest, that shows the ability for a host to reconnect to their space if for some reason they get kicked out. Is this something either of you have noticed or seen or experienced at all yet?
Well, I was a little confused by this. So is this like when you get rugged from a space, you can get back in more easily?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, from basically Hosteline's showing here 4 separate screen grabs. He does like his screen grabs. I can see you there in the space, Hosteline. Perhaps we'll talk to you about this a little later on if you're still around. And I think what he's showing here is that he was kicked out of his space that he was hosting. And when he went to go back into it, he actually saw a reconnect button on the Spaces card, which is something new. I don't think we've seen that before. Now, this is certainly something that I've not experienced, although we have in recent months had those instances where a host has been kicked out and the space hasn't crashed completely and kicked everybody off. There have been more instances where it's felt a little bit more stable, and those kind of things have kind of continued so that you can get back in without the whole thing just going to pot. So I guess this is potentially Twitter trying to make that kind of more obvious that you can actually be rugged from the space, but get back into it fairly easily and actually reconnect using the button. I mean, it would be useful. It certainly happened to us here on All Things Audio. It happened to you as well, Michael, in a space where you might have been hosting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I have an Android phone that I've hosted from every once in a while, or I use it as a secondary account to bring on stage. And it seems like every single time I make it a co-host, it will not last the entire length of the space. It will get rugged every single time. So, I mean, if this makes it easier, that's great, but it doesn't really, give a lot of points to the stability of their platform. That's all I'm saying.
Doesn't kind of apply to the core root of the cause. What do you think, Jennifer?
I have noticed lately more challenges with the ability to host a space and stay there. I've been kicked out more recently. I know that people get rugged all the time, but I haven't gotten rugged as frequently as others until most recently. And I didn't see the reconnect button. I was able to come back in and the space was still going, both as a host and as a co-host. And it's just been less stable for me lately. And I wonder if them trying to make it more stable, in my case, has actually made it less stable.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, maybe where they're kind of rooting about in the back end somewhere trying to zip everything up, it's actually knocking things over again. I have to admit, I haven't been in a space that's crashed, touch wood, for quite some time. And it was something that when Spaces first was introduced was something that was happening really quite regularly. And I felt like at one point, it was almost you were expecting, like, when is this going to happen within the hour? At some point when we get kicked out, make sure you follow my timeline and see where we are, because you'd spin up a whole new space. And the problem with that is obviously that those listeners that have been there with you in that space that you were hosting wouldn't necessarily come back. And if you've been sat there chatting to people for half an hour, that's a big loss. So I think it's right that they make sure that there is way more stability in the first place, and also that they work towards, okay, so this is something that could possibly happen. In the worst case, what's the best way we can get someone straight back in? I mean, it's quite, it kind of kicks you off your pace if you get knocked out of the space, particularly if you're hosting. I think one of the things I said to someone the other day is the biggest bit of advice I can give you is just to stay calm, take a deep breath, and not panic, because if you panic, it will take you longer to get back in. So, yeah, I think it's good that they've kind of put it right there on the button. It says reconnect. It tells you where to go. But as we're saying here, I think potentially dealing with the root cause might actually be a better use of time, really, so that we're not getting kicked out in the first place. The next piece of news is actually linked with communities. communities and spaces have definitely been something that we seem to talk about in tandem quite a lot. I guess because spaces came along and we were all talking about whether or not spaces could be set up for smaller groups, and then Twitter introduced communities, and that felt like potentially they might merge the two together at some point and be that kind of smaller group dynamic coming this way. This is actually another tweet from host Celine. Thank you. We do very much appreciate the tweets that you put out, and we do lean on them and speak about them quite often. This tweet is about an invite-only Twitter space, basically community from the look of it, that is about testing Twitter. So as we're talking about here, the different bugs and the different issues that might rise when you're in Twitter with the different features and all the different things that they're adding at the moment. This will be a community where you can go and talk to others who are experiencing bugs and issues. Is this something that we need, do you think?
I'm a big fan of this. I've been wanting this because the challenge for communities for me is that it's a difficult find in the normal course of business unless you go to communities, in which case then yes, you can find everything there. But prompting people who aren't already trained or haven't already gotten into the habit of going to communities to find the conversation, I think being able to have spaces that's specific to them, and that if you're a member of the community, you can see it, you can join it, you can participate, is a really great way to continue to expand and enhance communities and to kind of cement those bonds. Because right now, it's, for me, in my community's experience, it's not as rich of an experience as I would like to have, both as an individual and as someone who runs a community. And I think having the ability to have those, audio, obviously all things audio. Audio is such an intimate thing. And connecting everybody closely together can be so powerful, but yet wanting to have something specific for communities makes it seem extra versus just saying this is a space for the people in this community, but in reality, anybody can join, which is fine because you want more people to you want to have discoverability. But I really like kind of going, hey guys, this is just for us. And that real kind of closeness or that intimacy of something that's, if you're a part of the community, this is just for you.
Yeah, and I wonder whether or not it says on this tweet about there being a badge. So to be able to show other people that you're a member of a certain community might be something that would be quite valuable. This actually fits quite neatly with the idea of, I was talking over on Clubhouse about the other day, with the new houses that are popping up over there. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah.
Having a similar thing, like a badge that says I am part of this house. Is that something that would be useful? What do you think?
Yeah, I love everything that Jennifer said, and this reminds me a lot of what Clubhouse is doing with houses. They have actually a similar feature already in the houses where if you invite someone in who's not a member of the house, it'll show a little ticket emoji on their profile picture showing everybody that they got a guest pass to the house. So that little ticket badge reminds me of that. But yeah, this definitely will help communities to, not just Twitter communities, the specific feature, but communities across the world to come together. And I think this is what Twitter Spaces has really needed for a long time to help it out. I think the communities feature will help Twitter Spaces, and Twitter Spaces will help the communities grow as well. It just reminds me a lot of houses and clubs over at Clubhouse, and those have been really, really useful in bringing people together. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right in that the communities just give that real kind of sense that you're a part of something. I think when you're in a space, you feel that, and I think communities allow you to continue feeling that outside of the audio space. And it's a great way of continuing those relationships with the people that you're meeting in spaces as well. We do have an All Things Audio community. So please do come along and join us in that community. If you're listening and you're not part of it, then you're very welcome to join. I will be sharing the link for that at the end of the space. So watch out for that. And it would be lovely to see you over there talking about all things audio. Our next tweet, it's another one from host Celine. I do like to acknowledge who these tweets are from because they're not always things that have been found by me and Madeline, but they're certainly things that we want to talk about. This is another screenshot. This time we're talking about clips. Now, clips seems to be the Marmite of social audio, certainly the Marmite of Twitter Spaces. I hear a lot of people really unhappy about how clips works, not having a good experience with it, not being able to control it. We've discussed it at length here on All Things Audio. This screenshot in particular shows a new toggle switch, which allows you to switch off clips. So as a host, you'll be able to stop people making clips in your space. Now, either of you, are there reasons for wanting to do this, do we think, as a host, for turning off the clips? What do you think?
I have to agree with everyone that says it's a clunky experience, because I always feel like I'm doing it at the wrong time and I didn't get exactly what I wanted, and it just feels wonky to me. And I wish we had more control. I like the idea of clips a whole heck of a lot, but I think the delivery is less than. So I can see where maybe somebody wouldn't want it, but it's an interesting concept, because then if you're turning it off, then that just kind of shows how clunky it is. Twitter's acknowledging, yeah, and people don't like the experience, so we'll give you the option to turn off this terrible experience, as opposed to just making it easier for us to have a great experience, which would be better.
I mean, the spaces are being recorded when they have clips enabled. And so to just turn off the clips while the whole thing is still being recorded, I don't know what utility that is, other than acknowledging that the clips could be clunky and we don't want to necessarily highlight them. Like she said, I don't know. It's great that they have the option. I'm always fine with there being options to do things. How useful it is, I don't know. I guess we'll just see.
Yeah, and it's kind of, how can they make this a better experience? I mean, maybe that's too technical of a question to ask, but you're right, Jennifer, in that, one of the reasons that I wouldn't use it, certainly in a live scenario, live in a space, is because you just can't be sure what it is that you're capturing and sending out. And that then makes it really difficult to actually add any kind of tweet post to the clip to make sure that you've got the right context, or that you know that you're highlighting the right section of what you've just heard. I can see a few weeks ago, we were talking about it. We said with replays and clipping the replay, that gives you a bit more breadth to make sure you know what it is you're sending out there, and a little bit more time. You're not trying to do it on the hoof, as it were, while something's live and happening. But I just wonder what it is that they can do to really make this a better experience. And I'm quite surprised by the fact that they've rolled it out to desktop already without kind of really improving it in any way. It feels kind of against what they've done previously. Generally, they've improved something and then rolled it out further, whereas this just seems to be a similar experience on desktop to what it is on the mobile. And everyone was already not really, kind of happy with it, the way that it was on mobile. So, yeah, as you say, potentially it's a way of stopping everybody moaning about it, because their retort will be, well, you don't have to allow clips in your spaces anyway, so you don't have to use it. You can turn it off now. Perhaps it's just a bit of a sticking plaster until they can get round to looking at the design again and seeing what they can do to make it better. Who knows? We're going to move on to talk about Zealous. Again, thanks to host Celine. This is a tweet about the Zealous app, which again we have spoken about before. This app allows you to see all of the spaces that you have hosted right here on Twitter. So I'm guessing using the API key, it's kind of marrying your account into Zealous, and then you can see this amazing feed of all the different spaces that you have hosted, which is really, really cool. It also gives transcripts. I claimed my account over there earlier today. It looks a lot like Slack in a funny kind of way, in that I can add channels to my Zealous page. That's quite cool as well. I just love the fact that the transcription on here is really quite good. You can spend a lot of time with a transcript, editing it so that it makes sense. And I've used various different tools to do that. And in my work, with text to speech and speech to text and all of that voice techie type stuff that I do, I know that some are better than others. This one I rate, I really do. Michael, have you used Zealous at all?
Not until today, but I've been looking through it. I claimed my spaces, and one thing I did notice is that it seems to have a listing of all of the spaces that you spoke in, not that you hosted or co-hosted. And so, like, I'm seeing things from months ago. I didn't remember being in that space, but okay, that sounds interesting. Yeah, that's something to keep in mind as well.
I'm scrolling it right now as you're saying that, and I can see, some of the testing spaces that I've been in. It goes back quite a way. It goes all the way back to April. There are 30 conversations on here. There are various ones, as you say, that I've forgotten that I was even involved in, but certainly ones that I've spoken in, which I think is
The first listing I have is for All Things Audio, February 9th.
Nice.
Let's talk about social audio. Yeah, so there you go.
Brilliant. But I mean, it's a very clean interface as well. It's quite easy to navigate around. I like it. I like it a lot. And you can search within the transcripts, look for different speakers. You can play the audio while you're looking at the transcript. It's very clean and clear. And I look forward. They're obviously really upping their game with this. They seem to kind of, I don't know, they're sort of coming up on the sidelines, and every so often they just do something that you go, oh yeah, that's actually really clever, and it's nice to look at, nice to use. I'm really excited to see what they might do next with it as well. Jennifer, have you had a chance to have a look?
I've been just looking at it in a kind of surface way, and I have to say what Michael said, where you're like, oh, I forgot I spoke that. Is actually kind of like this rediscovery thing where it takes you down memory lane. Because, we're on Spaces, we're on Clubhouse, we're on Wisdom, we're on all things audio all the time. And it's easy to forget just how all of the spaces and how often we're talking in spaces. And so I kind of did like that little walk down memory lane. But here's my concern, or not concern, my curiosity, I guess, in reference to all of these awesome apps that come out. I always feel like not just Twitter, but that these, mainstay platforms that they see like, oh, that looks pretty cool. And so they kind of cherry pick all the wonderful things that these app developers have made. And then people go, oh, it's already embedded in Twitter. And so then they leave these platforms in the dust, or perhaps maybe Zealous is hoping that Twitter will just buy them. I'm always wondering about that aspect of these developers spending all this time and effort and this. They're innovating, and then just these big companies coming in and just cherry picking everything and then leaving them in the dust. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one who thinks that way.
No, I think you're right. I think there does seem to be a kind of culture almost of allowing the third-party developers to have a go, seeing what people like, and then bringing that into either a native functionality or... Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. And it's kind of the dark side, I guess, it feels like, of the dev world. I mean, I can certainly see that happening. I'm sure one or two of them, maybe just one, might be bought out in the end by Spaces. And in fact, by Twitter, sorry. In fact, our next tweet is about whether or not Spaces hosts use Tweetdeck, which is interesting. Again, another kind of sidecar tool that people will be using to access Twitter and to look at their tweets and to, funnel them out filter them into hashtags and all different ways that you can use Tweetdeck. And it just makes you think, have they kind of had a look to see what everybody uses and where it might be useful? And are they then going to bring that in-house? And will these people who've spent all of this time, effort, energy, thought time, space, get compensated for all of the work they've done on it? And sadly, probably not all of them will. It's a really good point to raise, Jennifer. And as I say, kind of probably the ugly side of development as well. So let's talk about this Tweetdeck tweet that came out from C at Work. She basically puts it out there. Any Twitter Spaces hosts here use Tweetdeck. Curious what you'd want out of Tweetdeck and Spaces hosting. We're exploring some stuff. It doesn't go into any more than that. See at Work, for those of you that haven't been in the space before, we refer to fairly often here on All Things Audio. She's a designer on Twitter Spaces, so someone that's kind of in the background doing the development work. And interesting to think about how Tweetdeck and Spaces might be used in tandem. Now, Tweetdeck's definitely one. When I first set up Twitter, and certainly when I was social media managing, was a fantastic tool. It was my go-to tool. I could see, as I say, kind of specific accounts that I wanted to be following. I could follow the hashtag. It's absolutely perfect if you're trying to get involved with Madeline's awesome Twitter Smarter chat. It was the only way that I could get involved in it, because otherwise you miss people's responses, and it's a great way of keeping track of that single hashtag for that hour and seeing what people are saying. But how could we use Spaces in that kind of way? I mean, have either of you got experience of using Tweetdeck?
I remember Tweetdeck from back in the day when they were the scrappy startup, and I remember using them and just being like, this is great. But at the same time, I was also using Hootsuite, which at the time had a little bit more robustness if you're managing lots of social media. But I always liked TweetDeck. I thought it was really cool. And when I found out that Twitter said, hey, we want you, we pick you, I was like, good for them. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I've used TweetDeck since its early inceptions before they were owned by Twitter. And honestly, I kind of keep forgetting about it. They've given up on the Mac app now. You have to use it in browser on a Mac. And in a lot of ways, I just kind of forget that it's there. And I don't know. Yeah, it's a great tool for Twitter. And if there's a way that they can integrate Twitter Spaces into it, that would make it a very compelling app or a platform for hosting Twitter Spaces. Certainly, you can keep track of all your notifications and your messages and the chat thread or entity thread for the space and have it all on the one screen like Club Deck does for Clubhouse. Club Deck is actually very similar to TweetDeck in that you have multiple columns. Each column has its own thing that it does. So you can see the hallway, you can see the room, settings, the room chat, your back channel, all on one screen. And so if Twitter can do something like that for desktop with TweetDeck, yeah, I'm all about that. That's cool.
Yeah, in fact, I've pulled it up while you were talking on my screen, and I haven't been in there for quite some time, but I could totally see how if I could host from desktop, this could be my studio effectively. I would, as you say, be able to see each of those things in a separate column, and potentially it would be far easier to share things into the nest from my bookmarks because I could have that open on here as well and be able to just press the button. Whereas what I'm trying to do currently, it's a juggle. It's a juggle trying to make sure I don't mute myself or everybody else. I don't accidentally leave the space, crash the space, or disappear completely. And that, everything's set up in my bookmarks and that I remember to do it because it's not instantly in my eye line because I'm trying to see what's going on in the space as well. So if I had it all on one screen, all in separate columns, that would make it much easier to do the juggle. So yeah, I think it's an exciting prospect, and I hope they kind of follow up on that and do something with it.
Yeah. I completely agree. I haven't looked at TweetDeck in a while, but when I pulled it up, I was already logged in. How nice is that? And I can imagine, like you said, having all your bookmarks there so that you can just immediately throw them into the nest and being able to keep track of all the chat. Because, down here, we've got chat in the bottom right corner. And I sometimes forget to go look at that, because it's kind of new-ish. But if I had the chat that was going on here and I could look at it in the columns, this just becomes a whole new robust feature set.
Oh, exciting. Perhaps we'll circle back round to you later on and see how you found it. Brilliant. Okay, our next tweet is from Dr. M, who is a frequent listener and contributor here at All Things Audio. This is a tweet about the space analytics, and it's really just kind of highlighting that there certainly was an issue in terms of the way that Spaces analytics were looking on desktop and the difference between how it was looking on mobile. Sorry. So yeah, effectively the stats that were showing for how many people had tuned into a space were different on mobile than they were on desktop. Let me just pop that in the nest so you can see the tweet. Let's see. You go. There we go. So yeah, he's got some screenshots here showing how for the same space he could see over on desktop 179 tuned in, but on smartphone 374 tuned in. That's quite a discrepancy. That's quite a difference. Madeline actually did say that this was something she'd experienced as well. And ultimately, Twitter did fess up and say that, yes, it was a bit of a bug. I'm unsure whether or not that's been rectified now, whether they've sorted it out. But yeah, it's a bit of a worry if you can't rely on the stats that we're getting at the moment. Did either of you kind of notice an issue with that?
When I saw Dr. M's tweet, I was like, I need to go back and take a look at that because it hadn't occurred to me to compare. I don't know why. I take whatever I see, whether it's on the mobile or whether it's on, I just go, okay, that's the number. And I actually never thought I should double check it. So I'm really glad that Dr. M said that because I might be actually having more listens than I thought or less listens than I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is important, especially if people are considering trying to gather stats for sponsorship or anything like that. then we'll be looking at the replays, we'll be looking at how many people are joining us live, all of those kind of things. The analytics aren't huge. We don't get a massive number of them. They're also not currently in the same place as all of our other Twitter analytics, and it would be lovely if they were. But if they are going to be there and they are going to give us some numbers, then I do think we need to be able to rely on them. So, it's great that they've noticed it as a bug, and I'm sure that they're working on it, or maybe even have done by now. Interesting to see that it was different between the two. And also a little bit of a reminder to those of us that host spaces, just to double check in each place, just in case. You don't know. It may well have happened to you as well. So our next story is actually about a feature that Twitter released that they've decided to shelve. And this is the idea of starting a space from a reply. So See at Work again, it's another tweet from See at Work, and she has tweeted out that she was very excited when it first went live, but she says, many experiments don't pan out. People weren't using it, and it wasn't fast enough. They're going back to the drawing board. What do we think about this one?
I don't think I ever had access to it. So
people didn't use it because they didn't have it. That's why.
True. I think it'd have been nice if they'd allowed us to play with it. Now, I know that when this first came out, there was a lot of us who gave some pushback because were we going to be notified that someone had decided to take one of our tweets and turn it into a space? And I think they had said no. And it's like, well, what if somebody is saying something not so nice about something that we said and we're not there to know about it or defend ourselves? Or maybe we don't want people to do that. Is it an option that we could turn it off? So I think there was more questions than answers, and they didn't really roll it out to enough of us super hosts who are hosting in, week in and week out several shows a week. I don't think they rolled it out to enough of us to truly put it through its paces. So I'm bummed that I didn't get a chance to test it, but I also understand why it wasn't getting used enough. Both, number one, we were a little reticent, and number two, they didn't roll it out to enough people, or at least that's my thought.
Yeah, I agree. I never saw it in the wild and was very hesitant about it being rolled out at all. So I wonder if the beta group was just tiny. I don't know anybody. No, I mean, and I am your ultra cautious person. So I guess I'm always the canary in the coal mine. I will always, I'm good in a crisis, but I can also damage limitation any plan you give me, basically, because I will say, oh, what about this? And this might happen. And what about that? And I guess what I was most concerned about was that a space might be spun up from a tweet that I had put out, and say that happened overnight and I'm asleep and I've got no way of putting in my thoughts on that tweet or expanding on what it was that I said. Now, does that really matter? Actually, once you put something out there, anyone can retweet it, quote tweet it, add their opinion and their thoughts to it. But somehow audio is just that bit more personal.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, you could start a space and they could pin it in the nest and talk about it.
Completely.
And you wouldn't, like, to me, if they could give a notification that a space has been started from your tweet, that's better than they're just going to randomly go start a space, pin the tweet in the nest. And if you're on Space's dashboard, you might find out about it. But otherwise, you just don't know.
Now, I have been swayed from no, I definitely don't want this feature, to yeah, I love this feature through experience on Spaces and over on Clubhouse. And so, my instant reaction is usually what could go wrong here with everything. And then I can warm to an idea and I can think it through a bit more. But as you say, I didn't have the opportunity to do that because I don't know anybody who had access to this. And it almost feels like they pressed the button to say, yes, this is a thing. And then literally went, let's pull the, tablecloth from underneath all the cups and saucers. And actually, we're not going to do it anymore. I don't think there was enough checking it out and seeing what people really felt about it. That was my thought on it in theory. Actually using it and finding a use case for it, making it useful, seeing how it would work. How did I feel if someone, to be quite honest, I'd probably be quite pleased if someone thought that I'd said something that was worth spinning up a whole Twitter space about, on Twitter. It's probably quite flattering. But I didn't get the opportunity to find out, as you say, because who had it? I mean, if none of us had it, there's quite a few of us in here. If you got it, then we want to hear from you in a bit.
And the other thing that I had thought they could do with this feature is if you wanted to start a space or jump into a conversation about a particular tweet, it could say in the tweet, there are X number of spaces about this tweet right now. Would you like to join one? Here's the listing of all of them or whatever. And I don't know. I guess this feature to me seemed like it had so much potential and they never gave it a chance. They just were so impatient or something. I don't know.
Well, it didn't have room to breathe. You've got to give stuff room to breathe, and you have to give us a chance to muck about a bit. And if they don't give us that chance, then they pull it back. We're like, well, you didn't give us an opportunity to really tell you what we thought or to actually experience it and put it through its paces. So I'm kind of bummed, even though I'm like you, Suze, I'm like, wait a minute, what if this happened? What about that? But I'd like the chance to experience it for myself.
Yeah, I mean, it says in this tweet it took them roughly 2 weeks to build. I'd suggest it was probably only out for 2 weeks and now they've killed it. So it is a strange one. Who knows? Maybe there are other features on the horizon that they would rather put their efforts into at the moment. Maybe it will become clearing time. Maybe it won't.
Well, Suze, if I could, just one more thing. Like, to me, this is a sampling of the overall questions I have about Twitter Spaces. It's like all these features and things, they're taking all these things and throwing them up against the wall to see what sticks. And some of them, they don't hardly, I don't know. I'm confused about what their ultimate vision for Twitter Spaces is if they're giving features like this, like no chance to even have a chance. So that's all. Yeah,
it's a fantastic point. It's a great point. And Michael, I want to hear about Clubhouse as well.
Well, Clubhouse, if you'll forgive the expression, has been all a Twitter lately about houses. And last week, there were a number of people who had applied to get a house and were given those. And so they have been adding people and growing their houses. Probably this week or the next, there will be a wider rollout of houses. We've already seen that in a couple of countries around the world. They're slowly rolling it out to active users in at least India and Japan. And I think there's maybe a third country. I don't know which one that is. And so houses are just a different container for rooms over on Clubhouse, and they're only for the social room on Clubhouse, which is a little different type than what we're used to here on Twitter or in the main hallways. A social room, just for those who don't know, doesn't necessarily have a stage and an audience where the co-host or the moderator has to let you on the stage. You can actually start in the listening area and then just unmute your mic, and it'll move you to the stage. You can also move back to the listening area later if you want. So houses are a collection of people who can all make rooms like that and talk to each other and build community and so on. So it's continuing to be rolled out, and they are continuing to squash bugs and add features and get it ready for the wide release. It's still in beta, but probably only for another few weeks, I'm thinking. So yeah, Clubhouse is all about houses right now, and some people like them. Some people really don't like them. Some people are miffed that they don't have their own houses yet. Yeah, so I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, I really enjoyed, I joined Morgan's house on Friday. He's going to be doing a regular room over there in the house that he's hosting. And I joined that on Friday. And it is just a completely different vibe being in one of these houses as opposed to being just generally in a room that you found in the hallway. And we discussed this a little bit while we were over there. And I think it's to do with trust. So at the moment, this is, you're invited into a house by the host. The host can then choose to give invites to those people that are members of the house. And those people are then trusted to invite people in. So everybody's in there kind of based on trust and linked to one another. And I don't know, there just did feel a more relaxed environment to speak in. I'm not sure that I would raise my hand as often as I used to, even over on Clubhouse in a random room, whereas it felt okay to be involved in the discussion in the house. So, really interesting why that might be, though.
Well, the other thing about houses is that none of the rooms are recorded. You cannot record rooms in houses. So there is an interesting dynamic to the way conversations can go and the comfort that people have in a conversation when they know it's not being recorded. They know that it cannot go anywhere. Like on Clubhouse, it's not a matter of like, it's not being recorded, but really the host could get it. No, like there's no access to the recordings at all in a house. So it's just a Clubhouse trust and safety thing. So yeah, I mean, I have already experienced a number of situations where we were in a house and we got to have a great conversation, or there was some connection between two people that they had never had a chance to talk directly to each other. So, maybe Jennifer and I might have been on the stage in a room like this, having, a conversation with you as the host, but we never had a chance to just sit down in a room and talk about, like, what's your background or yada, yada, yada. And so like the other day in my house, we had two people who have known of each other for a while. They've been in rooms on Clubhouse many times before, but they had a chance for the first time just the other day to talk with each other and find out, oh, this person's into this. Oh, great. I would have never known that had I not had a chance to just sit down and chat in a casual, comfortable, non-recorded environment where I don't have to raise my hand. Yeah, it's a lot more casual, and I think it's going to be great for building communities and strengthening relationships between people.
I'm curious, is this, and I'm asking because I haven't experienced the clubs, the houses, so I don't know. Is it kind of like water cooler talk, or is it like, after work business mixer, or is it, what in the real world would you compare it to?
They can be any of that. Yeah. Anybody in the house can start a room at any time, and you can change the title of the room. And so, like there's a beta tester's house that all we do is talk about the features of houses, squashing bugs and all of that. And, anybody who has a question about a particular feature, they could start up a room in the house and title it, what's the deal with the new admin status, or how do I make somebody an admin, or whatever. And, people can just pop in and answer the question, have conversation about it. It can be very casual. Other people are being very deliberate about the way that they are building their houses. There's a member number that's assigned to each person, depending on when they accept the invitation to the house. And some people want to make sure that particular people have a particular number. And there are guidelines that you can put in place as to, what rooms, what the topic of the rooms are that people start, that you don't want people discussing anything except the particular subject of the house or whatever. It's really up to the house founder to set the culture of the house as to, what the guidelines are, what sort of rooms can or should be started, what people should or should not talk about on the house chat with each other. It's all up to the founder and the culture they want to create.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I can invite you into my house. I'm slowly rolling my house out, and so
What is the? I don't understand. I'm missing something. This is George. What's the supposed safety of no recording when anybody can record anything on social audio with Otter or
Obviously.
any other variety of, obviously is right. Yeah. So I don't understand. Am I missing something? Where's the safety?
No, obviously, George, anybody can record anything at any time.
Right.
But the idea is that these are intentionally made as a more casual, comfortable, private area of Clubhouse that's not meant to be recorded.
Right.
And it really comes down to the people that you put into the house and the trust that you have in them.
Yeah,
and like
and
so
you
in
can't
my
access
house,
them later. You
Right.
can't, they're not sitting around for access.
Right.
I understand that for re-recording.
But I've even specifically put in my house guidelines, do not record in our house unless you are using it for testing purposes and you only keep it to yourself and people know that you're doing it for those purposes, because I want to intentionally set that culture that you can come in here and feel like you can speak freely and speak candidly and not have to worry about this is going to be on a replay and people are going to hear this later or people are going to clip it. Yeah, I'm not going to have any of that.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Great answer. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Michael, for talking to us about that. Host Celine, it is lovely to see you. How are you?
¿Qué pasa? How are you guys doing?
It's all good here. Thank you so much for all the tweets. There were a lot of them at the top of the show that we referred to. And yeah, thank you for being the super spaces sleuth that you are. What have you got to tell us?
Well, I would like to delay what I have to say because Gregarious is here, and I would love for him to just share his update on Zealous. I put a tweet that they just shared from the Zealous account that talks about not only the newest features that they've just released, but also the timeline and the ability for us to vote. So because he's here, I would like to give precedence to him if you guys wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. No problem at all. It's great to see you, Gregarious. We haven't seen you for a while, and we were certainly talking about Zealous earlier and everything that we can do over there. How are you?
I'm good. Too kind. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Jocelyn, as always. Excited to do this new release today. Jocelyn was one of the people who voted up the feature. The sort of point we make in the thread is, oftentimes you hear really interesting moments, but you're like trying to find them later on after the fact. Maybe you want to get a quote of it, or maybe you want to think about it and read it again or something like that. So today we've added search and filtering into Zealous. So any space, essentially, you can go back to it and then filter by the person who's speaking. And you can also add an additional keyword filter to look for a certain word maybe that they said. So you can use any permutation of that. Show me every time someone said the word audio, or show me only when Jocelyn said audio, etc. And one of the little tricks it does is it basically is creating a playlist dynamically. So when you do that filter, when you hit play, it jumps only between those instances. So if you really wanted to hear just the things that someone had to say, you can actually just pick their name, hit play, and basically just listen to the parts where they're talking and filter out everyone else in the conversation.
Gregarious question:
yeah.
Does it? Can you go beyond the one space you're in? Does it do across spaces or just within the space?
Great question, George. We are going to have across the board coming. This right now is per conversation, right?
Got it.
So,
thank you. Great feature. Thank you.
And, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We're really excited about it. Honestly, I think I underappreciated how useful it was to be able to do this until I saw it. And I was like, oh, this is really helpful. But folks who are using it right now just for their Twitter account, you obviously get your spaces, but we have other, there's a much bigger platform sort of behind the scenes. You can actually upload content today. We are working soon enough on an RSS importer so that we can actually just ingest your RSS feed. And I think the whole goal, just for resetting or stepping back a little bit, the goal for Zealous is to create a collaborative environment around your content. And the first step of that is to basically create a playlist of all the content that you're putting out into the world, right? So we are I think right next, actually, we're integrating Zoom meetings into here, but RSS feeds, we can already take file uploads from a URL. And additional sources coming, but the goal is to basically create one unified playlist for all of the content that you're producing.
Can I ask one more question?
And it's automatically transcribed, etc. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Can it be done? Can you do a transcript real time, or is that coming like Otter? That would be phenomenal.
We can
as
do
the space
it.
is happening.
Okay, so yeah, for clarity on how we work with spaces, we don't look at spaces in real time. We can, we just don't. We also don't look at spaces that aren't recorded. And I think much to the conversation everyone was just having, we think it's really important people know they're being recorded. And so we only look at recorded content. We process it almost immediately after the fact. We do have the ability to do it. The API is there technically, but also I think just in terms of staying within the terms of service and all the other fair use things, we've currently chosen not to process real-time streams. We do, by the way, in Zealous actually have our own recording tools. So in a lot of ways, we're like Spotify, right? Because we have like the playing side and then we have the anchor side. So we have a meeting tool and we have a live streaming tool. And those tools, we will be able to offer real-time captioning once we bring them back online. And I think we'll be able to continue to evolve that situation. I think, it depends on how Twitter evolves on how they want us to work with spaces, and the data is going to ultimately be the rate limiter on that opportunity.
Yeah, that was one of the things that we were actually speaking about, I think, before you joined the space, was how, as a third-party developer, you've obviously spent an awful lot of time on building this for spaces and, thinking about what hosts need and want and working with hosts to build something that adds on to Zealous as an offering for social audio hosts and users. But is there not that issue where Twitter may well take a look at it and pick the best ideas of it and run off and make it for themselves? Is there, as a developer, is there a fear of that happening, or is it just more that, for you, for Zealous, social audio is something that you want to support and therefore create these features for within your platform?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I would say as a dev, as a platform builder ourselves, there's always risk when you build on a platform, right? Twitter might decide tomorrow they don't want us to do what we do. They could say like, hey, that's a cool feature. We'll implement it ourselves. I think that's always kind of the risk there. We're not a Twitter-centric product, I guess, though, to be clear. Twitter is just a very convenient and easy source. And also, I think, widely available source for conversations. We actually are currently focused on sort of the Web3 side of the house. So we actually have NFT gating. We work like to bring in Discord conversations and things like that. So, I think like when we think about conversations, we think that, communities are conversations. Ultimately, you're having those conversations in a variety of different places. And to make a coherent experience from all of those places is really important. And I think Twitter will never get to that point, or I find it very unlikely to anticipate that they're suddenly going to be ingesting a bunch of these other sources for you. I think also the Twitter UI precludes some of the behavior that you see in Zealous, right? So, we think that a conversation should be available in as many formats as possible. So that includes video, audio, and text, because different people learn different ways. We also think that ultimately it should be available in different languages. So we plan to offer, you the option of translating your content to multiple languages. So you could create conversational artifacts to serve your whole audience, right? And as I said early, we view this as a collaboration platform ultimately, and that means being able to let people interact, react and reply in line to what people are saying, because we think that every conversation or every piece of content we put out into the world is an attempt to spark a conversation with folks, but they should not be penalized because they couldn't be there live or in person. And certainly you shouldn't be penalized because the format that you may be publishing in doesn't allow two-way communication.
Sure. I mean, the other thing is, looking at this on here, I think as well, you may well have helped with the clipping. We've been talking about the clipping feature on Twitter and how clunky it is and kind of useless, really. But what this actually does on the platform is you can create an audiogram from the transcript. So as you were saying, you can now filter. I can see all of the instances where I spoke in last week's All Things Audio space. From that transcript, there is a little share icon. I can either copy the text of that particular line that I said, I can share that text, or I can share an audiogram. Now, I am a huge proponent of audiograms. I love using Headliner to create them for podcast promotion. I think they work really well across social media. But to be able to just hit that button and get a card with the profile picture and then the audio clip that I want it to feature is a fantastic feature. So, yeah, anyone who was, we were talking earlier about clips not being natively what we want it to be. This is certainly another option and another way of doing it where you can definitely be sure what it is that you're sharing out with people. So I've shared the new feature tweet that went out on the Zealous account a little while ago up in the nest. So please do go along, hit that and follow them and check it out for yourself. It's fantastic. Thanks so much for coming along and speaking to us, Gregarious. It's great to have you here with us.
You bet. And by the way, Suze, I will say, Peter's working he was working right now. I think we got delayed a little bit on editing that transcript so the text can be cleaned up. Only the host will be able to do it. And then the second thing, just a future feature that is coming, we did a test already, but we'll be able to export your space, the entire space as a video or shorts or reels if you want. So basically we're working on getting the ability to export your space or parts of it to every platform as well. So just kind of more headliner features natively inside of Zealous.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And for those of you in the space that might not have heard of Zealous before, the reason we started speaking about it first off was because it was somewhere where you could go to download your space as a host. And initially, recording this social audio stuff and having a copy of it, either, for yourself or to use as a podcast like myself and Madeline do, was kind of one of those key things. Once we realised we could talk to each other on social audio, we wanted to be able to capture that and to put it out as content in other places. And the Zealous platform was one of the first places that allowed us to do that. So that feature is absolutely still on there as well. And to hear that you're broadening that out into other, other areas and other mediums is fantastic. So very good. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Hosteline, I see that hand.
Yes. Thank you again, Gregarious. I knew that you had some action-packed content there. Just wanted to provide that opportunity. And Suze, to your delight, I actually gave an example of what you just mentioned regarding creating a clip. So if you look at the Spaces chat feature, I did just that. So in all fairness, Gregarious just gave me some more time to prep that tweet that I was able to go to Zealous, find specifically the questions that Jennifer and Michael had regarding the tweet to space feature of being notified of a tweet that has been used to create a space on. And I actually clipped the question that I asked the Twitter Spaces team and their response to that particular question. And their response was that, which is a kind of a weird one, that they didn't want to overwhelm the creator of a viral tweet. And the logic, which is kind of weird, because if your tweet goes viral, you're going to get a bunch of notifications anyway. So what's one more, especially one that has to do with the tweet that you created? In any event, that was their official response, but I did want to give you a bunch of different things all at once, which is the answer of your question and an example of Zealous all in one shot. So hopefully that's been helpful.
I was just going to comment on what they gave as the reasoning for that, because like you can go into your notifications and see a grouping of, new tweet notifications and it just lines everybody's icons up. And so why couldn't they just do, a new space notifications from your tweet, and then it lines everybody's up of all the different spaces? I don't know. Like, it just feels to me like they could have thought through this a little harder, and almost like they're kind of just lazy about it. And I don't know. I'll just leave it there.
I'm just a reporter, Mike. I don't.
No, I know. I'm not blaming you at all. But a few little things I've seen and heard here and there from the Spaces folks, I'm like, well, how committed to it were you in the first place? Because these excuses, I'm just not buying them. I don't know. But that's just me. Maybe I'm just being curmudgeon-y or something.
No, I completely understand. I do want to make clear the initial tweet with the multiple screenshots. I didn't really get rugged. My phone spontaneously reboots. It has nothing to do with Twitter. Now, when my phone was rebooting, it took a little bit longer for the actual phone to restart. So when I re-entered the space, it was technically over, but I was able to rejoin it. Now, I say technically over because of two things. There is a limitation as to how long it takes for you to re-enter a space and kind of restart it or reconnect to it. It's 190 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. But when I entered it, I noticed that I did get a message, which is in the screenshot, that said it was over. So I just wanted to experiment to see what happened, and it continued on. Now, what was also fascinating is the fact that I think it was that space where the audio wasn't kind of recorded, and a bunch of people said, "Hey, Hosteline, the audio wasn't recording." I even had a conversation with Gregarious, which is like, he mentioned like, "Oh, wow, there's an issue that your space says it's uploading still." I'm like, "Yeah, but that has nothing to do with you. It had to do with this issue." And what was nice is that when the audio was resolved, I had to like re-import the space. I don't know if I had it to, but I just did. I re-imported the space into Zealous, and then the transcripts and everything was like readily available. So that was a cool feature. So just in case something happens and Zealous isn't able to, for whatever reason, get the original, because it does it automatically, you could actually import the link to the space into Zealous, and it transcribes it, and everything is gravy.
Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.